Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. In Hebrew, name is Petronistim. IDSF is the leading Israeli organization advocating for strong national security to defend Israel. At the forefront of all of that work is my guest today, the head of IDSF Research Or Yissachar. Or it's great to have you on again.
Great to be with you, Moshe.
And I don't know if many of our viewers know. But you are a master at that thing behind you, right? On your screen.
Absolutely. This is not just decoration, folks. This is actually my good buddy over here, and everyone can see I'm working on a Beethoven sonata right now. So it's cool that probably people were interested about.
Fantastic. Maybe we'll have to do a separate series of briefings on the music coming out of Israel.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
let's jump into one of the top issues today. Hezbollah, since the ceasefire, are they, as good citizens of the world, honoring the deals that they set with Israel?
No, they're not. And I think Israel has been heavily scrutinized for violating the deal itself. We can see how the France proposed to put together a team or has announced that he's tracking really Israeli violations, only Israeli violations. It reminds me of the court, the ICC in The Hague, that has been tasked to monitor Israeli violations or in war crimes since a certain date, and none of it related to any Palestinian war crimes or actions. But the general ambience in some circles is to test Israel and how it ruins the party, quote unquote, and violates the ceasefire. But we can see a whole host over really dozens of violations on Hezbollah's part. Just a few days ago, Israel eliminated several militants that were really putting rockets in a van in an attempt to launch them. Just yesterday, there was a mortar that landed in Mount Dov in northern Israel. And very rarely, to be honest, last Saturday, there was a Mahan Air airplane, an Iranian airline that was forced by the Israeli Air Force not to land in Damascus. In Damascus airport, it was forced to backtrack and go back to Iran by Israeli planes because, according to estimates, it carried ammunition that would not be rare. Israel has, for years, been warning against the Iranian, smuggling of weapons into Syria and from there to Lebanon. So this is another front too. What's going on in Syria affects Lebanon. This is a major route of wiring arms to Hezbollah.
And all these violations that are going undetected, unnoticed by the international community, are they really being pushed by Iran, or is it Hezbollah on its own that is doing this?
Both. Iran is the main puppet master. Iran's main strategy is to really destabilize the region, and to that end, it invested tens of billions of dollars a year that it's been investing in really wreaking havoc around the region. We saw how its defense budget was boosted by skyrocketed by 45% ever since the nuclear deal with Iran with the Obama administration, like between 2015 and 2016. And it has been investing in terrorism, funding terrorism. The Nukhba terrorists of Hamas were training in Iran just 3 short weeks before the October 7 massacre. All these things do not come in a vacuum. And surely Hezbollah is interested in the rearming, but it'd be very, very hard for it to do so without funding and support and all the arms smuggling that Iran wires into. And where will we get the arms from? Where will we get the money from? It is mostly from Iran. Some narco-terrorism business in South America, also in the United States. I'm reminding you the Obama administration also reportedly blocked this what's called Project Cassiopeia, that Project Cassandra, sorry, that monitored Hezbollah drug trafficking inside the United States, really trafficking drugs and fentanyl into the United States, making money off of it. Just to fund Hezbollah. And in order to make the nuclear deal with Iran succeed, that administration stopped monitoring Hezbollah narco-terrorism inside the United States. The Biden administration halted, actually, one of the first things it did in the first month in office, removed the Houthis, an Iranian proxy in Yemen, from the terror watch list, and only to, retract it back to that list a few months ago. So that's, I believe, lack of American leadership that has been signaling to Iran that it is free, it has a green light to wreak havoc around the region.
So if already this soon after the ceasefire is implemented, we are clearly seeing they are in violation and they are rearming themselves and trying to build back up, is Israel going to be caught off guard again? Israel's now obeying this ceasefire and just allowing Hezbollah to plan the
Hmm.
next round?
I think it won't fall into the same trap as it did in the past 20 years. Look, the IDSF, we warned about Israel allowing the enemy to metastasize, rearm, regroup on the other side of the fence. We said constantly that we should not wait till the next war. And now we actually see that the Israeli decision makers, I don't know if they're listening to us, but it certainly looks like it because we're all over the media and we're meeting them face to face, and the defense establishment, the IDF, etc. And they're all actually considering, Netanyahu said it in his voice, violating the ceasefire would no longer be shooting a rocket or a mortar or a missile. That would be even arming oneself with a rocket or a missile. And we saw how Hezbollah militants were attacked just for moving rockets from place to place or for attempting to launch them. And Netanyahu said it himself: if Hezbollah, gains arms, that would be for us a violation of the agreement. And I listened to Amos Hochstein, the U.S. envoy to the region, was in charge of the Lebanon file. He didn't say it was 60 days of pause. He said, for me, I don't know what all these reports are. For me, this is a long-term ceasefire. Obviously, the Israelis and the Lebanese don't see it this way. We see it as 60 days where we test seriousness. So far, it doesn't look very promising. It looks like Hezbollah hasn't got the message. And in my view, the broader picture is that we should not be only relying on tactical military achievements. The fundamental change will come from within Lebanon, from inside Lebanon, to do what we call de-Iranization of Lebanon. Outlaw Iran, outlaw Hezbollah, crack down on Hezbollah. And we don't see the Lebanese do it. In fact, they're doing the exact opposite. So if that's the case, then we shouldn't stop the war until such time that Lebanon is regrouped as a proper, normal, sovereign state with no armed militias, just like UN resolutions decided so again and again.
So General Avivi has shared with our audience a number of times the difference between Syria and Lebanon, how Israel over the years has constantly been operating in such a way to kind of extinguish the flames in Syria before they
Hmm.
really creep up in a way to build a Hezbollah. How does Israel recreate that scenario in Lebanon, given what Hezbollah has built over so many years? Is that a possibility?
It is a possibility now, thanks to what Israel has been doing over the past 3 months, which is neutralizing really some three-quarters of Hezbollah's stockpile of weaponry, some estimate. And so remember, Israel has been acting in Syria for 13 years now, at least, and targeting Iranian warehouses and munitions and even military bases, and was killing Iranian generals and was killing Hezbollah militants and really carrying out airstrikes deep within Syrian territory. Hasn't been Israel hasn't been allowing Syria to become an Iranian frontal defense in the same way that Lebanon has become one. And the only question is, why has the Syria doctrine hasn't been implemented in Lebanon? This is really what we all want to know, because Hezbollah in Lebanon has become an army with 150,000 missiles and with attack tunnels. And in Syria, somehow Israel has not been allowing it to happen. And so I think the Lebanon strategy was completely inverse, completely backward until last year. And now we've gone through a year where Israel destroyed so much of Hezbollah's capabilities, destroyed its senior leadership, including Nasrallah and its successor, and probably his successor. And so uh, the situation now is fundamentally changed. My expectation going forward, Israel needs to continue hammering Hezbollah so long as it rearms. What we called after the 2021 Gaza operation, we called it Maraka Maftuha in Arabic. Hamas has called it Maraka Maftuha, which means an open campaign. We should have an open campaign in Lebanon, in Gaza. Whenever you have, like in Judea and Samaria, whenever we have intelligence on terrorists who will regroup and want to shoot at Israel or just gain missiles, we attack. We don't let the enemy metastasize. But once again, Moshe, I'm just like, repeating myself like a broken record. The Lebanese people need to take responsibility. Otherwise, it will never work.
Absolutely. We have a question coming in from a viewer that I want to ask you, and it's always great to get questions during these briefings.
Yeah.
So for all of our viewers sending in the questions, keep them coming. If you're watching in the live Zoom, you can throw them into the chat. If you're watching on YouTube, you can click on the links in the description to join the live Zooms. You can, of course, join our mailing list. Somehow people know how to email, WhatsApp, call me with questions day and night. We love getting them to direct all of this. Okay, or the question is that there are those who are arguing that the reason Israel entered into a ceasefire with Hezbollah is because Israel was running out of weapons and they had no choice. True
Mm.
or false?
True, but partially. We don't have to believe rumors. We should only listen to Netanyahu himself, who said it in his speech last week. He said, I gotta be frank with you, some of it has to do with scarce ammunition, and we are expecting these ammunitions to be released soon. What does that mean? Would the Biden administration agree to release ammunition to Israel like they did with Ukraine, allowing it to shoot American missiles deep into Russian territory? And really, the Ukrainian all-out attack in Kursk, Russia, is absolutely astounding. Or are we waiting for January 20th to a new Trump administration, where these ammunitions are expected to be incoming? My expectation is that we're in for quite a lot of surprises in the coming 2 months with the transition of administrations. And Netanyahu, I think, is counting on that, and therefore he's sort of okay. I have what I want in the Lebanese front for now. I'm not ending that war. Like we're starting talking like Arabs. That's good. That's a good thing. We started speaking Arabic, which is I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. For now, I'm happy. Let's see tomorrow where we get, and then when the conditions improve, I attack. That's smart. I'm just saying we're not done with the war in the north. We have to be sure that Hezbollah never rearms, create a buffer zone, and again, Lebanon needs to outright reject Iran, just like, by the way, Soviet satellite states did in 1991, outlaw communism and Soviet influence, and really reject all this influence from Lebanon.
We have another question from a viewer, which is a perfect segue to our next discussion. You're suggesting that in Lebanon, to really have success, the Lebanese people have to kick out Hezbollah. But let's look at
Yeah.
Gaza, because we have Hamas in Gaza, and the Gazan people have not yet kicked out Hamas as an entity, as an ideology. So let's talk now about Gaza. What is the state of the war in Gaza and the Gazan people vis-a-vis their relationship with Hamas?
Yes, you're reminding me actually with your question what Senator McCain asked General Nicholson back, I mean, I think a decade ago, about the war in Afghanistan. As you know, General Nicholson was the commander of the U.S. Mission in Afghanistan back in the day, and Senator McCain, the late Senator McCain, asked him, "Well, in simple terms, General, are we winning or losing in Afghanistan?" Very simple question, and the general said, "Well, sir, I think we're in a stalemate." So that's not a very definitive answer. What does it mean, stalemate? Who's winning? And right now in Gaza, I think we're in a stalemate. We're definitely, not to compare Ukraine and Russia. Our supremacy, military supremacy over Hamas is unquestioned and unmatched. That's for sure. And right now, we cleared most of the Gaza Strip from Hamas infrastructure. We brought back 150 hostages. 100 still remain there today. Just yesterday, we recovered a body of another Israeli who was very sadly murdered. People often forget that Hamas executes Israeli hostages in captivity. It's not something that we should look away from. More than a dozen of them were executed in captivity, so far as we know. And so right now, we are making gains in the north, in the south, and the center has become really a place where most of the Gazan population is concentrated. And until such time the IDF takes complete control of the Gaza Strip, we're never gonna it's never gonna end. But we certainly must not retreat to the pre-October 7 boundaries. We looked up to 67. Now we're talking about 10/7 boundaries because really, I mean, I'm happy to talk about like scenarios for the Gaza Strip, but this is a red line. We cannot go back to October 6th line because we will just invite the next massacre.
Okay, so tell me, Do you think that the IDF should or will take full control of the Gaza Strip?
Yes, and we said that since October 7 of last year. If you listen to interviews that we had even with you, Moshe, a year ago, a year and 2 months ago, as from October 7, 2023, that's exactly what we've been saying. There is no other alternative than the IDF taking complete control of the Gaza Strip. And that means that we will have to do what we call, lawn mowing in the military slang, right? You mow the lawn and you keep arresting terrorists. And you know how, for example, do you know how many terrorists we arrested in Gaza before the October 7 massacre, in the decade preceding the October 7 massacre, right around zero, where we had absolutely no access to the Gaza Strip. And then an army of terrorism has metastasized there. Is exactly what happened in Lebanon. And so post-war, the IDF must be there. I think Israel should not accept neither a Palestinian state, it's out of the question, nor a whole autonomy in the Gaza Strip. This as an entity is threatening Israel's security, and the only thing that's there is the population. And so our proposal was to move on to the next stage, the interim phase in Gaza, the humanitarian phase. We will take control over humanitarian aid from UNRWA, that is from Hamas, because we know aid ends up in the hands of Hamas. Whoever controls, that's what our generals taught me. Whoever the hand that controls the food is the hand that controls the territory. You cannot hope for an Israeli a proper, post-war scenario without taking control of the humanitarian aid. And we have to create spaces where Palestinians reside, in displaced cities, like you have in many other disaster-struck zones around the world, Sri Lanka, Haiti, what have you. Uh, and food and humanitarian aid will be going there, and to allow the IDF to take complete control over the Gaza Strip until such time the Palestinians lay down their arms, give back the hostages, and reject Hamas. I'm sorry, but Israel is not going to let October 7 happen again. We're not going to retreat to the 67 borders and just to wait out to the next October 7. And so this is absolutely a must-have. Until such time, the Palestinians, I don't know, will become Swedish or Finnish, and then we'll have a peaceful coexistence. But until that point, we'll have to do the work ourselves.
How far away do you think we are from the army taking over that humanitarian supply chain for Gaza?
We should have done that months ago, and I think it's only a matter of decision. Well, we're talking about in the nuclear world, we're talking about in terms of the breakout time, right? How long between the decision time and breakout time to the bomb? Like what's a breakout time between decision time and actually obtaining a nuclear bomb? And in this world, where just the decision time is like basically, it's zero. I mean, from the moment of decision, you change the reality in the Gaza Strip. The IDF has already constructed 10 cities in Gaza, for example, near Khan Yunis, in the north of the Gaza Strip. It has done so extensively in Rafah, in the south. And the IDF is now orchestrating really a praiseworthy mechanism of humanitarian aid. People forget, but the IDF is simply allowing UNRWA to handle it instead of taking over it itself. The mechanism already exists. And over the past year and 2 months since October 7, actually, the IDF has allowed, and Israel has allowed, in over 1 million tons of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Over 1 million tons, 800,000 metric tons of food of that amount. And so people all say that the Gazans are starving. I'm sorry, but to that calculation, that would mean that 2 million people in Gaza are getting over 3,400 calories every single day. Now, whoever you did diet, everyone who knows is a very large amount, 3,400 calories per day. That's certainly not starvation. I'm not saying the situation in Gaza is not difficult. It's not challenging. Hamas and various gangs often take control over the aid. All of that is true. But to say that Israel is using starvation as a strategy of war, like Joseph Borrell from the EU or Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, is saying, even the Pentagon and the U.S. Department of State are saying it's outright false. So, in my opinion, that's the only choice that Israel has.
Thank you, Or. So the IDF successfully takes over Gaza, takes over the distribution of the humanitarian aid. Then what?
Look, I'm not offering a perfect solution. I'm offering an interim phase until such time we figure out the solution. There are 10 different solutions in my mind currently. City-states, autonomies, what have you. I just think that we need to move on to topple Hamas. And when we do that, when we take over the humanitarian aid, Hamas will no longer have the leverage, and Gazans will begin to revolt, and we will have actually some degree of cooperation with responsible local people who can manage local life with our assistance when they understand that this is Israel who's calling the shots, and really there's no other choice but that. And I think this is really the point, because up until we decide that, we can never change the situation. And just to give you an idea, the international community has been donating all that over 1 million metric tons of humanitarian aid over the past year. Do you know how much money that cost? Because they always scare us with all the costs, incurred costs over the Israeli taxpayer. Well, Israeli taxpayers paid zero. Nothing for that humanitarian aid. People don't know the humanitarian landscape around the world. The United Nations World Food Program, World Central Kitchen, there are dozens of charities, of NGOs, of governments, of banks who contribute. Starbucks, Microsoft, they're all contributed to various disaster-struck zones around the world, right? From Sri Lanka and Indonesia to Haiti. And so the world contributed over $2 billion of aid to the Palestinians over the past year. $2 billion. Now, just imagine that their claims of starvation. Do you know how much they contributed to Ukraine in humanitarian aid? $2 billion. That's quite astounding. Over the population there is some almost 20 times larger than the Gaza Strip. And they still get the same amount. So at some point, Israel has to stop being responsible for every turmoil that happens in the Middle East. And at some point, just like the Lebanese have to take responsibility, Palestinians have to take responsibility. And we have to ask ourselves the tough questions. Who is managing who's cooking the books? Where's all the money? Where are all the reports? And the Palestinians have to be accountable. That's why Arafat was refused by Norway and other European countries when he said, no, I want the money to my own fund and I will manage the money. No, this is not working. And until such time the Palestinians learn how to, behave like proper society with an administration and proper transparency, there's no choice. Israel will have to take care of it just to prevent the next massacre.
Sure. Okay. Or let me ask you a tough question. It's, of course, very easy for us to pass judgment on the IDF operations in Gaza not being in there. And I'm not at all doing that. But a lot of people wonder, why is it taking so long, right? Why everything that you're
Hmm.
suggesting, the IDF should take over fully Gaza. They should completely take over the humanitarian aid. Why hasn't that happened? Is it an operational decision on the IDF level, or is this a political decision in the government?
You mean the humanitarian aid or, toppling Hamas?
Both, both.
Yeah, it's a political decision. Look, I think both decision makers in cabinet and the IDF have to decide on that. And to be really honest with you, I hope nobody's listening. I don't think the IDF has wanted that until now. The IDF wanted to avoid all that and not to control Gaza the way that we recommended. And to be honest, we're not talking about martial law. We don't need to speak in such frightening terms. We're talking about managing humanitarian aid distribution. That's all. The IDF can do it. It has been doing it in Gaza. It just, allocated to UNRWA everything that it's been doing. It can do it itself. It's very easy. And it's because it's already been doing it for a year and 2 months, and it has been doing it for 20 years. I remind everything that's going through the passages of Gaza has been run by the IDF COGAT. So it's been running for years. There's nothing to be afraid of. But I also think cabinet has to instruct. It's a matter of political decision. I would say it's a combination of probably a multitude of tasks and being too able to multitask in such a war. And we see many other processes in this war. Just an example, outlawing UNRWA have been delaying a long time, and we've been yelling about it and pounding the table for over a year now. We've been saying really the same thing for over a year now. The second guess, my guess would be the White House. So outside pressure on the Israeli government not to do it and just leave the place. We heard the U.S. Secretary of State saying there's simply no substitute for UNRWA. And the only solution is a two-state solution. And we know about harsh conversations between State Department officials and the Israeli cabinet on the future of Gaza. Never invade Rafah. It will take you weeks to evacuate the population. It's taken only within a matter of days. So we know about that. But honestly, I would expect much better results.
Or I really appreciate your time and expertise. I want to ask you one final question. You have been sharing your opinion, and IDSF leadership has been sharing their opinion on these briefings for more than a year now. Our viewers, I hope, understand the general disposition of our movement. Do you think your voice, do you think the IDSF collective voice is being heard on issues like you're suggesting in terms of the day after plan in Gaza? Is anyone listening to what you are saying on the decision-making level?
Absolutely. I feel it every day. And to be honest, many of the things that were considered taboo before the war are now, I think, mainstream. Like we outright rejecting the notion of a Palestinian state. I hear people on the left and center left who are open-minded, and we said, let's just, live, side by side on the other side of the fence. And others saying, never in a lifetime. You should topple them. And this is why, I have to, protest that they're trying to, many voices, the topmost levels of the European and American decision-making levels, who just say it's a political decision by Israel to continue the war. The people of Israel want to continue the war. The people of Israel, I hear my combatant friends who are doing a remarkable job in Gaza and in Lebanon, in Judea and Samaria, and they are not tired at all. They want to continue fighting until we eradicate this evil from the face of the earth. We heard the testaments of the warriors who fell in the war. They said we are writing a chapter in history now. This is our commitment. We have the right to take part in this chapter of history. And so this is a fight of the people. This is like our friend Ronen Itzik told me in our podcast, this is a victory of the society, not the politicians. And I think we all understand that. And I think the IDSF has been making critical contribution to this discourse. And just by, taking a policy paper that we wrote, and you all read constantly, Netanyahu has been holding these papers. I was sitting in the room with him, and I was shocked to see that my paper I just collected from the publisher, the printing house, the prime minister is holding it in his hand, and we saw the same thing with the Minister of Defense, Minister of Foreign Affairs. We are being listened to. A lot of the decisions that were taken during the war, I can't take credit for them, but I'm saying that we contributed to the discourse to legitimize them, and then, of course, going out to the media, to great people like you, and to legitimize them and normalize them and talk about these things. These are very basic things that we're demanding. We just want to live peacefully in this country. But a lot of the recommendations that we hear, the demands we hear from the international community, are going backwards to pre-October 7. And so our commitment is not to wake up again at 6:30 a.m. To have 1,200 Israelis butchered and 250 taken hostage. This is really our commitment, and nobody can put themselves in our shoes and tell us what to do unless they are here fighting with us. And that's really what we're hoping to get, a long-term vision where we exist in peace and security. And yes, it's not perfect. It's going to be hard. No solution or plan I'm going to give you is going to be perfect, but we're not living in a perfect world. We're living in a world of constraints and of conditions. And so I just hope that going forward, I'm positively sure going forward, we'll win this war.
Or Yissachar, head of IDSF Research, thank you for everything that you are doing to lead this fight, to lead Israel. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. We will be back with you next week, Monday, 10 a.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.